Hi there everyone, Lars here, with another Defending Tolkien video, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And I know that I said that my next video would be about why the Eagles could not be taken to Mordor in order to destroy the ring. And I am right now in the middle of making that video. There's a lot of really awesome lore and things that Tolkien put into his books to help explain why, although it's a fantastic meme, why taking the Eagles to Mordor would have been an awful idea. And I'm really excited to share all of my findings with you guys. However, since I've been working on that video, a lot of news has been dropping for the Rings of Power series, and I have some thoughts. Now, things started really rolling with the Vanity Fair article that dives into what we can expect with the Rings of Power series. And it's very clear that the people over at Amazon have a certain agenda, and not just what they wish to portray within their show, but also how they expect to deal with people that don't like their series. So I am not going to fall for the trap that they have so brilliantly set up, and that nearly every other YouTube commentator and analyst and Tolkien fan has actually fallen into. I am not going to talk about the matter of diversity. Diversity is great. We've talked about it here on the channel and in our podcast. It's a great thing. I have faith that the actors are going to do their absolute best with a horrible script, and I applaud them for that. And also, as we've said here multiple times on Camille's Harem, we do not want to talk about politics unless it is fictional politics. So no, Amazon, I am not going to fall for your little trick. Instead, I am going to drive a sword right through the heart of one of the dumbest things that you guys could have done, and something which is honestly such a great shame, because you could have done so much with this one character, and that is Galadriel. Yes, I see that Galadriel is supposed to be one of the main characters of the Rings of Power, as well she should be. However, this is not Galadriel, or at least this is not the Galadriel of the Second Age. This is the Galadriel of the very early First Age. Back in the time when the Noldor revolted against the Valar, left Valinor, and made their way to Middle-earth to pursue Melkor, or as they named him, Morgoth, and reclaim the Silmarils. In those early days, Galadriel was very headstrong. She was very perceptive. She was wise for her age, but she was also at the same time hot-headed. She's powerful, she's witty, and she's ambitious. That is the kind of Galadriel who would be wearing a sword, who would be wearing armor, who would be going into battle. Why? Because that's what we know that she was doing. And there's so much that you could have done if they had gone into the First Age and actually explored that. The problem with setting this kind of Galadriel in the Second Age is that it goes against the established canon as we already know it to be. By the Second Age, Galadriel is not wandering about as some military leader trying to unite the peoples of Middle-earth against some unspeakable foe that has been left behind in the fall of Beleriand and the defeat of Morgoth. No, at this time Sauron is repenting of his sins. This is the time where the elves are coming together, men are recuperating from the loss, and people are beginning to search for prosperity. Evil is being wiped off the map, and it seems like Middle-earth, with a lot of work, can recover from the devastating First Age. So during this time, Galadriel works with her husband, Celeborn. Yes, she is married at this time. She wouldn't be wandering around. She works with Celeborn to form an elven kingdom that will be a safe haven for all of the elves that are still around in Middle-earth. The Noldor, the Sylvan, all forms of the Eldar who have come. That is her goal. And one of the ways that we know this is that Tolkien, in the last months of his life, wrote extensively about Galadriel and Celeborn, explaining their story, their goals, and basically everything that they were doing during the Second Age, leading all the way up to the War of the Ring. And there is so much there that I absolutely love that I know that the show is not going to get into. One of the things that I really like, and this is something that could really easily be teased out for some great drama, some great character development, and maybe also an explanation as to why Celebrimbor would be willing to make the ring rings of power. You see, Galadriel laments the fact that the wars of the First Age have devastated so much of Middle-earth, a land that she has come to love since leaving Valinor, and she desires to create, once again, this beautiful haven for the elves. And she laments to Celebrimbor that there's really nothing to restore the world to the way it should be. And she laments the fact that there was a great magical gem that was lost in Gondolin that could restore things. And Celebrimbor says, Galadriel, because of my love for you, I will make this stone for you, the Eleazar. And this is really neat right here because Celebrimbor actually deeply loves Galadriel, but Galadriel's already married to Celeborn. And so to show his love and affection for Galadriel in the best way that he can, without being too creepy, Celebrimbor forges the Eleazar, a magical green stone that will allow the wielder to preserve the lands around them. He gifts it to Galadriel, and Galadriel uses it to help build up Lothlorien, and eventually gifts it to her daughter, who then gives it to Elrond, who then gives it to Arwen. Actually, I should pull that back. Really, it just goes directly to Arwen, and Arwen will later gift it to Aragorn as a sign that he is the rightful king of Gondor. This is awesome, not only because we get to see these relics that are within the Lord of the Rings get their origin during the Second Age, but we also now understand their importance, and we begin to understand more about Galadriel as an individual. Whereas she once was the hot-headed warrior who fought against Morgoth's armies and helped to forge kingdoms within Middle-earth, who had great ambition to have her own kingdom, well, one age of warfare has subdued a lot of that ambition. Now, rather than seeking dominion, Galadriel seeks peace and prosperity. She has put aside the young girl that she used to be. She is now a full woman, and she is acting like a queen should. And she's growing into the role that we will recognize her in The Lord of the Rings as the wise, powerful queen of Lothlorien. And that is something very important because, once again, this shows great character progression for Galadriel. This is kind of the middle part of her story. And you can tease out how, even though she has been granted a pardon by the Valar and an invitation to return to Valinor, where her father is, where she can find peace, where she can even meet the spirits of the dead in the halls of Mondos, and reconcile with all of the family that she's lost during the First Age, she decides to stay in Middle-earth in self-imposed exile because of the things that she did during the First Age. She does not feel worthy to return, and there is still a slight bit of ambition there, something which she only finally rejects when presented with the One Ring by Frodo when he goes to Lothlorien. Again, this is great character setup and a great character arc, as we see Galadriel slowly, over the thousands of years, becoming who she is meant to be. And it's also great when we understand her full character arc that it mirrors a lot of what we actually see in the character of Frodo, a hobbit who wishes to go on adventures, be the hero, but as he then experiences his own adventures, as he experiences war and the weight of the ring, he changes over time and he becomes someone at the end of The Lord of the Rings who is even willing to spare Saruman despite everything that the wizard has done to the Shire. Why? Because he has come, just as Galadriel has, to appreciate life, who desires peace, desires to preserve, and would rather do everything possible to avoid bloodshed, and only if it becomes necessary, take those actions that will snuff out life. And that is the journey of someone who has experienced harsh warfare, who at one point had that hot-blooded temper, but has learned to quell it in light of all of the knowledge and wisdom through the experiences that she has had. And this is just sadly something that I know we're not going to get here in the show, or at least not in the way that it could be. Because this Galadriel that we see right here in the series, this is not the Galadriel who was there for the kinslaying, who watched as the Teleri, her cousins, were slaughtered, and depending on which version of the kinslaying you decide to go with, she might have participated in it, or she was there and just observed it, or in some cases she participated in trying to save the Teleri from the Noldor. This is again First Age stuff that Galadriel lived through, and this ties in again to her relationship with Celeborn, who is a Teleri. There's so much fantastic stuff here that can be explored that sadly won't be explored because, well, the show is basically creating a variation of Galadriel that should not exist in the Second Age. And as they've already said, they're condensing thousands of years into just a short space of time. As a result of that, all of the great character progression that we should get for Galadriel is going to feel rather rushed and forced. And when you begin to think about it, you're like, wait a second, how does this exactly work? This is one of the problems that comes with breaking canon. We've talked a lot here at Camille's Harem about why it's so important to stick with canon, whether it be that you're writing fan fiction or if you are writing your own stories. Sticking to your canon is necessary in order to keep the audience engaged and not break them out of the illusion that you're trying to build for them. Furthermore, following canon prevents you from writing yourself into a very uncomfortable corner. This is something that I've learned for myself to be very true. I have had to go back and make massive revisions in my own books when I realized, holy crap, I went against my own canon. I did something that I wasn't supposed to. I thought it was really cool. I wrote it. I enjoyed it until I looked at the canon and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have just done something that I shouldn't have. This makes it so much harder to believe what's actually going on. And it makes you wonder why characters don't just take a much easier route, which could be there, but that would then deprive them of all the sweet character progression, and as well, it would break necessary rules for later on in the story. This is something that Tolkien very, very much understood. Tolkien was meticulous in crafting his own narrative canon. There are stories about how, as a young kid, Christopher Tolkien would listen to the stories from his father and actually comment on things that Tolkien himself actually gotten wrong, which Tolkien would then go back and fix it. Why? He didn't really have to. Some of these things are just absolutely minute details. But Tolkien wanted to make sure that whatever he wrote was very purposeful, that it made sense, that everything connected to tell a strong, flowing story. And this is something that, as a linguist and as someone who studied myth, he would be very acutely aware of. If you are a fan of various kinds of myths, whether they be Greek, Egyptian, Native American, whatever, you'll realize that there are a lot of details that are very fluid, and that's okay because these were largely oral stories told and reshaped by the teller. But what it means is that it's kind of hard to ascertain the actual truth of what a myth might be trying to tell you. Tolkien wanted to make sure that there was no doubt of what he was trying to create and of what he was trying to say. So that meant that his myth had to have a very strong and clear canon. So what does this all mean about Galadriel and the Rings of Power? Well, we'll see what the show actually brings. But what it means to me is, because this is a young Galadriel, when this should be a woman in her absolute prime, and when she should be a Galadriel who was way more level-headed, who was worrying more about protecting her people and preserving Middle-earth, not going to battle. No, that's left up to Gil-galad and Elrond to do. Well, by having more of an Aiel Galadriel, more like you were taking Aviendha. If this were Aviendha, I would totally believe it. But unfortunately, this is not Aviendha. Right here, this is their version of Galadriel. What this means is that this is not the Galadriel of canon. And as a result, well, don't be too surprised if her character and her arc feel forced within the series, or if it doesn't really come to the kind of fruition that we would hope it to be. Canon must be respected. It's very, very hard to subvert canon in an adaptation and not somehow break the story or the characters. So those are my thoughts on the matter right here. This is unfortunately not Galadriel, and it just goes to show that once again the Amazon Rings of Power series is not really going to hold true to the canon that fans of J.R.R. Tolkien have come to expect. And while yes, the Peter Jackson movies, especially for The Lord of the Rings, did take liberties in certain areas, they always respected the general canon, the trajectory of the different characters, and whatever changes they made were still ones that could fit within the canon and the world building of the story, thereby never really removing even fans of the books from the wonderful feeling of just being swept away in this grand epic. And that's something that I really wish that the Amazon creators would actually do right here, because I want to be swept away into Middle-earth again. I want to return to this place. I love the Lord of the Rings so much. I love the world of Middle-earth. I love its extensive lore and history. And I just wish that there would be a more faithful adaptation to it, because that would be something that would sweep everyone away. When I look at the comments for the most recent trailer and everything else, it's clear that the fans of Tolkien are not excited for this right here. And while I do not think that this show in any way is going to fracture the fan base, what it does mean is that it's just going to be sad. It's going to be a sad thing to watch this all unfold, unless they can pull off a miracle and show us that they can still respect the canon and do something amazing with the works that Tolkien gave them. So, with that being said, I'm going to move on to much more cheerier topics, like talking about destroying the One Ring of Sauron. And believe you me, when I get to that video, there's going to be some amazing things that I'm going to throw your way. Bits of lore, bits of world building that are hidden within the books, as well as some brilliant narrative decisions made by Tolkien to have this adventure of the Fellowship. So, stay tuned for that. If you're interested for when I come out with that video on why you should not fly the eagles to Mordor, please make sure that you click the bell and that you are subscribed for all of our content. And if you are a novice writer looking for more writing advice for novice writers, please feel free to check out our other videos here, and especially go head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We also have writing exercises over at our Pinterest page that we would love for you to check out. And please feel free to join our own fellowship, our own group of novice writers. We have links for all of our sites down in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, thank you for joining us on this adventure that we call writing, and tschüss.